The Millionaire's twins fought nonstop until the nanny did something no one expected. In the upscale suburbs of Boston, along tree-lined streets, whispers began to circulate about the Monteiro residence, a house where every morning was filled with screams and the sound of objects crashing. Just 3 years earlier, it had been a home overflowing with light. Amanda Monteiro, a free-spirited painter with a radiant smile, had turned every wall into a colorful canvas. She often let her twin daughters, Isabela and Sofia, play with watercolors until their little hands were covered in bright splashes of red, blue, and green. But when illness suddenly claimed Amanda's life at only 39, the atmosphere within the mansion changed completely. Since then, mornings in the Monteiro household were no longer marked by laughter, but by endless battles between the 6-year-old girls. Each scream echoing through the elegant walls cut like a knife into the heart of Gabriel Monteiro, their father, a renowned architect. With sunken eyes from sleepless nights, he stood powerless as the house, once filled with memories, slowly transformed into a silent mausoleum. Gabriel Monteiro stood before the grand mirror in the foyer, his trembling hands adjusting a deep blue tie. Morning light poured through the tall glass windows, reflecting a hollow face that looked far older than his 44 years. Dark circles clung to his eyes, his shoulders sagged, and an emptiness lingered in his gaze, all betraying the exhaustion of a man carrying both the weight of his career and the struggle of raising 2 young daughters alone. Upstairs, the shouting erupted again, followed by the crash of toys hitting the hardwood floor. Gabriel closed his eyes. It was the same every morning. Once more, Isabela and Sofia had turned their bedroom into a battlefield. "This is mine." Isabela's shrill voice cut through the silence like a blade. "No! Mom said it belongs to both of us!" Sofia screamed back, her tone trembling with both fury and desperation. Gabriel exhaled deeply, fingers tightening around the knot of his tie. He had grown accustomed to the noise of construction sites, but the sound of his daughter's arguments pierced him to the bone. Every time they fought, he felt as though he was losing Amanda all over again, the wife who had left behind an irreplaceable void. To the neighbors, Gabriel was still the successful architect, the man behind Boston's sleek towers and prestigious awards. But behind the villa's doors, he was only a weary father, powerless. His buildings might reach the Boston skyline, yet his heart could not manage to keep his 2 little girls sitting peacefully, side by side. On certain nights, Gabriel sat alone in the living room, staring at the piano draped in white fabric where Amanda once played lullabies. The house, filled with expensive furniture, felt colder than ever, each footstep echoing like it belonged in a cavern. He once believed time would soften grief, but 3 years had only deepened it. He had hired 3 nannies and 2 child therapists, but all of them gave up. "They cannot be managed," they said. In truth, the girls didn't need managing. They needed someone to understand that they hadn't just lost their mother. They had also lost the sense of how to love without fearing their memories would be stolen. And Gabriel, despite his brilliance and talent, despite having designed masterpieces across the city, could not draft a single plan to mend his family's broken heart. He knew only this: if things continued this way, he would lose both daughters, not to death, but to the widening distance growing between them. The sound of a cane tapped rhythmically against the wooden staircase, each step deliberate and firm. Donna Teresa Monteiro, Gabriel's mother, descended with the commanding presence of a woman who had lived her life enforcing discipline. At 70, her silver hair was tied neatly in a bun, her posture as straight as when she had once been a high school teacher. She didn't need to raise her voice. A sharp glance and tightly pressed lips were enough to silence the entire house. "Gabriel," she said, her voice raspy but steady. "This cannot go on. The girls need discipline. They need boundaries." Gabriel looked up at his mother, his weary eyes tinged with resignation. He had heard these words too many times, but Teresa was not one to relent. She believed that, like every other wound in life, grief had to be buried deep, never spoken of, never allowed to become habit. "You think letting them talk about Amanda will help?" she asked, her thin hand clutching her rosary. "No. Mentioning her only keeps the wound bleeding. The only way to survive is through silence." For Teresa, memory was dangerous. She believed that if people kept digging into the past, they would never move forward. So she taught her granddaughters avoidance, never mention their mother, never unlock the studio, never cry in front of each other. But the result was obvious to everyone. Isabela and Sofia weren't being protected, they were growing more confused. At just 6 years old, they were left to wrestle alone with the grief that the adults around them refused to face. Gabriel gripped the arm of his chair, sighing deeply. "Mother, sometimes I think silence hurts more than the crying ever could." But Teresa only shook her head, her eyes unyielding as steel. Deep down, she believed she was doing the right thing to protect her family. On a gray Monday morning in Boston, light rain drizzled against the Monteiro mansion's tall windows. At exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and Gabriel frowned. He wasn't expecting anyone at this hour. When the heavy wooden door opened, a young woman stood there. She wore a worn fabric coat, clutching a faded tote bag and a spiral notebook to her chest. Her hands were thin but steady, her face free of makeup, her brown hair tied in a simple low bun. "Good morning. My name is Clara Mendez," she said, her voice calm yet warm. "I came to apply for the housekeeping position." Gabriel froze. His mother, Dona Teresa, hadn't mentioned anything. "Did my mother hire you?" he asked, half suspicious, half bewildered. Clara nodded slightly. She said the house needed order. Her gaze flickered toward the staircase, where the familiar sounds echoed again. Hurried footsteps, a door slamming shut, and muffled crying. "How many children do you have?" Clara asked, not accusatory, simply attentive. "2 daughters, twins," Gabriel replied hesitantly. "They're difficult." "In what way?" Her question was simple, but it caught him off guard. Others before her had arrived with theories, methods, and promises. Clara merely asked, as if she wanted to understand before she judged. Gabriel sighed. "They fight all the time, over everything, from toys to memories of their mother." He swallowed hard. "She passed away 3 years ago." Clara gave a slight nod, her dark eyes steady on him. "I know," she said softly. "Dona Teresa told me." What surprised Gabriel most was the way she pronounced the word past, naturally, without avoidance, without fear. "Can you start today?" he asked, the words slipping out almost involuntarily. "Yes," Clara replied with a faint smile. "But first, I'd like to understand the girls' routines. Could you show me around the house?" They climbed the stairs together. Clara walked quietly, yet her eyes absorbed every detail, the picture frames turned face down, the piano draped in white cloth, the locked studio door with a small plaque that read, "Amanda's Studio." Gabriel stopped, noticing her gaze. "This is where my wife painted," he said softly. "The girls used to spend hours here, until my mother locked it. She thought it best not to stir painful memories." Clara said nothing, but her eyes softened, silent understanding that needed no words. Then they entered Isabela and Sofia's room. The girls sat on opposite sides, each building her own Lego tower, an invisible line dividing the room into 2 hostile halves. "Good morning, Isabela. Good morning, Sofia," Clara said, her tone natural, as though she had known them for years. Both girls looked up, suspicious. To them, visitors always meant new rules and more restrictions. "Who are you?" Isabela asked, her voice small but sharp. "I'm Clara," the woman answered, crouching down to their level. "I've come to help take care of your home." "You'll leave too?" Sofia muttered, eyes fixed on her Lego. Everyone leaves. Clara studied them for a long moment. Then she did something no one else had done before. She sat down directly on the Lego border, a gentle smile forming on her lips. "May I help you build? I have an idea. If we join the two towers, we can make a bridge." The girls glanced at each other as though it was the first time in months someone hadn't asked them to divide, but invited them to unite. Clara sat on the wooden floor, right in the middle of the invisible border that split Isabela and Sofia's bedroom in two. The girls stared at her with the wary look they always reserved for adults. Anyone else who entered this room would instantly bark commands. "Sit still! Stop that! Hand over the toy!" But Clara was different. "Bridges don't have to be the same color," she said softly, holding up a red Lego piece. "In fact, the most beautiful bridges are always built with many colors together. What do you think?" Isabela frowned, glancing at Sofia. Sofia blinked, lips pressed tight. It had been so long since they'd heard an adult speak about joining rather than dividing. In that moment, neither of them responded, but Clara didn't rush. She began stacking Lego blocks into a small strip that linked the two towers. When she placed the first piece down, Isabela let out a quiet sigh and added a blue one. Sofia bit her lip, but eventually picked up a yellow block and set it next to the others. It was only a tiny, shaky bridge, ready to collapse at any second. But for Clara, it was the first sign the two small hearts had agreed to try. The next day, a greater test came. Cries rang down the hallway as Isabela and Sofia fought over a pale pink leather notebook. "Give it to me. This is Mom's journal, and she left it for me," Isabela screamed, clinging tightly to the book. "No, it's for both of us. She wrote it for the two of us," Sofia shouted back, yanking hard until the pages gave a tearing sound. Clara rushed in, her heart clenching as the precious pages began to rip apart. "Girls, stop!" But her voice was drowned out by their sobs. In that fateful instant, the journal tore in two, its pages scattering across the floor. Both girls froze, staring at the fragments as if they had just broken the last remaining piece of their mother. Isabela fell to her knees, trembling as she gathered the sheets, whispering, "I ruined it. I made Mom sad." Sofia buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, her cries breaking with despair. Clara sat down beside them, picking up one half of the torn book. She drew a deep breath, then spoke gently. "You know, when we share a piece of cake, we end up with less. But when we share a memory, it doesn't get smaller, it grows bigger. It becomes something both of you can keep, remember, and carry in your hearts." The girls lifted their tear-streaked faces. Clara pressed the torn covers together, her voice unsteady. "Your mom didn't write for just one of you. She wrote for both. A mother's love is never divided. It's whole in each of her children." Silence filled the room. But this time, it wasn't the heavy silence that haunted the Monteiro house. It was the silence of two hearts beginning to understand they were not alone in their grief. Isabela slowly reached out toward Sofia, and in that moment, Clara witnessed the first miracle. Two trembling hands grasped each other, not to fight, but to hold on. One Saturday morning, while Gabriel was away for an urgent meeting and Donna Teresa was at church, Clara was tidying the downstairs when the familiar sounds of quarreling drifted from upstairs. She hurried up and stopped before the locked wooden door, the studio of Amanda. Isabela and Sofia stood right in front of it, their faces flushed, their eyes wet with tears. In Isabela's hands was half of the torn journal, while Sofia clutched the other half. Between them stretched a tense silence, ready to snap at any second. Clara didn't speak right away. She looked at the door, then at the girls, and whispered, "Do you want to know what your mother used to do behind this door?" Isabela gasped. "We're not allowed. Grandma said we can't." "Yes, Sofia added, her voice trembling. She said it's a place of sadness. Clara knelt down, her gaze tender. Some people lock doors because they're afraid memories will hurt them. But sometimes, behind those doors isn't pain. It's something your mother left for you. She stood, reaching into the porcelain vase on the hallway shelf. Instinct guided her, and sure enough, a small key lay hidden inside. When the lock clicked open, both girls held their breath. The door creaked ajar, revealing a space thick with dust. Morning sunlight slipped through worn curtains, casting pale golden streaks across the room. The studio remained exactly as Amanda had left it. An unfinished canvas on the easel, paintbrushes stiff in jars, a palette dotted with dried bursts of bright color. And on the far wall, a massive unfinished painting left all three of them frozen. Amanda had painted herself with her two daughters, not as they were, but as she dreamed them to be. In the painting, she soared through a blue sky, holding both girls' hands, each of them with shining golden wings. Below stretched a boundless world of vivid color. Sofia whispered, "Mom was painting us." Isabela touched the edge of the canvas, murmuring, "She wanted us to fly together." Clara stepped closer, tears brimming in her eyes. In the corner of the painting, in small, affectionate handwriting, were the words, "So you may always fly together." The room fell silent, but it wasn't the silence of mourning. It was the silence of connection. Clara turned to them. "Would you like to finish this painting with your mom?" Isabela's eyes widened. We're allowed to?" "This isn't a museum," Clara smiled, retrieving jars of watercolor paints from a low shelf. "It's a legacy, and legacies are meant to be continued." She handed each girl a small brush. Isabela, trembling, dipped hers into blue and painted soft clouds around the figures. Sofia chose orange, adding tiny birds fluttering nearby. "Look!" Sofia exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "The birds will fly with Mom so she's never alone." "And these clouds," Isabela added, "will give her a place to rest when she's tired." Clara sat back, her heart tightening with emotion. It was the first time she heard their laughter ring out in this house. "You have to paint, too," Isabela suddenly said, handing Clara a brush. Clara hesitated. "I'm not sure I should—" "Mom said art is meant to be shared," Sofia interrupted firmly. Clara took the brush, her hand trembling. In the bottom corner of the canvas, where Amanda had left it blank, she painted a small rainbow bridge, linking the earth to the sky. "What's the bridge for?" Isabela asked. "So your mom always has a way back to you," Clara replied, her voice thick with emotion. The three of them sat there for hours, painting and laughing as colors smudged on their hands. When they finally stopped, the canvas was no longer unfinished. It had become a miraculous collaboration between a mother gone and her daughters still here. Isabela leaned her head against Sofia's shoulder. Sofia clasped Clara's hand, and for the first time in 3 years, the studio was filled with life instead of sorrow. That afternoon, when Donna Teresa returned from church, she heard laughter drifting from upstairs. It was a sound the house hadn't known in years, and instead of relief, suspicion surged within her. Climbing the stairs swiftly, she stopped at the threshold of the studio. What she saw made her heart seize. Amanda's unfinished painting, now covered with white clouds, birds in flight, even a rainbow bridge. Her granddaughters giggled, their hands smeared with paint, while Clara sat between them, brush still wet in her hand. Teresa's face hardened into stone. "What have you done?" Her voice cracked, yet brimmed with fury. We only wanted to finish the painting for Mom," Isabela whispered. "Silence," Teresa barked. "You've ruined the last thing your mother left. You've defiled her memory." Sofia trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But Grandma, we only wanted to feel close to her." Clara stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Teresa, with all respect, this isn't destruction. The girls are reconnecting with Amanda. This is how their grief can become strength instead of a wound." "You have no right to speak," Teresa nearly shouted, pointing at Clara. "You are nothing but hired help, an outsider. You have no idea what Amanda meant to this family." The room grew heavy. Clara lowered her head, pain slicing through her, because the woman was right. She was only the housekeeper. But then Sofia's small voice broke through, shaky yet determined. "That's not true. Clara didn't do anything wrong. She gave us a way to remember Mom happily, not just by crying." Isabela nodded fiercely, clutching her sister's hand. "If Mom were here, she would want us to keep painting." But Teresa would not yield. With trembling hands, she locked the studio once more, the turn of the key echoing like shackles. Then she faced Clara, her tone cold as ice. "From this moment, you will only work downstairs. You are not to speak with the girls again. I won't allow you to plant illusions in this house." Isabela burst into tears. Sofia clung to Clara, sobbing. "Don't go! You didn't do anything wrong!" Clara knelt, pulling them into her arms. A week passed after the studio was locked again. Clara kept her promise, working only on the ground floor, never seeking out the girls. But Isabela and Sofia found their own ways to break the rules. On the first morning, Clara discovered a childish drawing slipped under the supply room door, a crooked version of the painting in the studio, with shaky letters that read, "Thank you for letting us paint with Mom." The second morning, it was a small note. "Don't be sad. Let's laugh like that day." By the fourth day, they left a tiny flower from the garden, wrapped in a napkin. Clara kept all of it in a wooden box, as if they were irreplaceable treasures. That evening, Gabriel came home late. To his surprise, his daughters weren't quarreling, but were sitting together, building a shared Lego city. "What are you two making?" he asked, his voice touched with disbelief. "We're building a city for Mom to visit," Isabela explained cheerfully. "Yeah, this big house is hers, right in the middle," Sofia added, pointing proudly. "And this is ours. That way, she can have dinner with us every day." Gabriel froze, a lump rising in his throat. It had been so long since he'd heard them speak of Amanda with joy instead of tears. After putting the girls to bed, he went downstairs. Clara was rearranging dishes in the cupboard. Gabriel spoke softly. "Clara." She stiffened, looking up with a flicker of worry. Since she'd been forbidden from seeing the girls, their conversations had grown rare. "Can I ask you something?" Gabriel hesitated. "Do you have children?" Clara was silent for a long moment, her hands tightening around the plate she held. Then her voice trembled. "I had a little boy, Miguel. He was 4 when he died of a brain aneurysm 6 years ago." Gabriel fell quiet. In that instant, everything clicked into place. Why Clara understood his daughter's pain, the words she chose, the look in her eyes, full of both tenderness and loss. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Thank you," Clara said, forcing a small smile, though her hands trembled as she set the plate down. "I understand the girls because I was afraid too. Afraid that if I didn't mention my son, I'd lose him forever. But if I did, others would feel uncomfortable. So I learned to let love be bigger than pain. I make heart-shaped pancakes every Friday because that was Miguel's favorite. Not to cry, but to remember that he once brought joy." Gabriel sat down, his voice low. "That's why you let Isabela and Sofia paint in Amanda's studio." Clara nodded gently. "Yes, I believe Amanda left the paints and brushes not to gather dust, but so her daughters could keep creating life from her memory." In the quiet of the kitchen, 2 people, each carrying their own wound, finally admitted their grief. And in that moment, an invisible thread was woven between them, not from pity, but from true understanding. One rainy afternoon, Gabriel grew anxious when his mother, Donna Teresa, hadn't returned from visiting a friend. Restless, he decided to follow the address she had scribbled on a small piece of paper. When he arrived, his breath caught. It was an old cemetery, its walls draped in moss, the wind rushing through rows of maple trees. By a small grave, Teresa knelt, her trembling hands adjusting a withered bouquet. "Mother?" Gabriel called softly, stepping closer. She startled, quickly wiping tears from her cheeks. What are you doing here?" Gabriel knelt down, his eyes falling on the inscription etched into the stone. Gabriel Monteiro, 1952-1955, beloved son. His heart clenched. I had a brother?" Teresa closed her eyes, her shoulders shaking. "Yes. Raphael was your twin. You were both born premature. He lived only 3 years, in and out of hospitals. And one day, he didn't make it." Gabriel felt the ground slip beneath him. "Then why? Why did you never tell me?" "Because it was too painful," Teresa whispered, her hand stroking the stone. "Your father couldn't bear it. Every time he looked at you, he saw the child we lost. He drowned himself in drink, and me. Silence was the only way I could survive." Gabriel stood motionless as old fragments of memory suddenly arranged themselves into a complete picture. His mother's obsession with unity, her panic at seeing Isabela and Sofia argue, her rigid silence toward grief. "That's why you can't stand to see them divided," he said softly. "Because you see yourself and Raphael in them." Tears streamed down Teresa's face. "Yes, when Amanda died, it felt like losing Raphael all over again. Amanda was the only one brave enough to mention him, the only one who brought me here with flowers. Your wife understood that sorrow shouldn't be buried. But when Amanda was gone, I retreated to silence again. It was the only thing keeping me upright." Gabriel held her hand, his voice breaking. "Mother, I understand now. But my daughters don't need silence. They need to be loved through memory, not denial." In the light drizzle, mother and son stood by the small grave, sharing for the first time a burden hidden for 40 years. And in that moment, Gabriel knew. Clara had been right. His daughters weren't troublesome out of defiance. They were fighting not to lose their mother all over again. The next day, the atmosphere in the Monteiro house shifted. Donna Teresa woke earlier than usual, her eyes still red from a sleepless night, yet something softer glimmered in her gaze. For the first time in months, she climbed the stairs on her own and stopped before the locked studio door. The key trembled in her hand before she slowly turned it. The door creaked open, the smell of old paint and dust filling the air. But this time, she didn't feel fear. She felt peace. Clara, cleaning the hallway, witnessed the scene in surprise. She stepped closer. "Mrs. Teresa, are you all right?" The older woman turned, her eyes moist, but her voice steady. "Clara, I want to talk." They sat inside the studio, where Amanda's painting now bore new touches, soft clouds, birds, a rainbow bridge. Teresa stared at it for a long time. No longer did she see defilement, but continuation. "I know about your son," Teresa began, catching Clara off guard. "From the first day, I recognized the pain in your eyes. I too lost a child, Raphael, Gabriel's twin brother." Clara froze, her heart tightening in shock. Suddenly, every harsh rule, every silence from the older woman made sense. "That's why I was afraid," Teresa confessed. "Afraid to see Isabela and Sofia separated, afraid to look back at the past, afraid of someone teaching them to move forward, as Helena once taught me. I wasn't ready." Clara gently placed her hand over Teresa's wrinkled one. "But you're ready now, not to forget, but to love differently. Raphael isn't gone. He lives in your memory, just as Miguel lives in me and Amanda lives in the girls." Silence filled the room, but this time it wasn't heavy. Teresa nodded slightly, her voice trembling. "Would you teach me to paint again? I used to when I was young. Helena always urged me to try, but I was afraid that joy would betray my grief." Clara smiled through her tears. "It would be my honor. Joy doesn't betray grief, it heals it." That Sunday, for the first time, the whole family entered the studio together. Gabriel sat with his daughters, Clara prepared the palette, and Teresa carefully picked up a brush after so many years. Her hand trembled, but when Isabela exclaimed, "Paint with us, Grandma," the fear began to dissolve. Her first strokes became tiny golden butterflies. "Why butterflies, Grandma?" Sofia asked. "Because they remind me that beautiful things can be born out of the dark," Teresa replied, lips quivering but her eyes shining. Laughter filled the room, mingling with the smell of paint and the burst of colors. Clara stepped back, taking in the sight, 3 generations healing together, turning pain into gentle memory, memory into art. In that moment, she knew healing had truly begun, not just for Isabela and Sofia, not just for Gabriel, but for Donna Teresa and for Clara herself. As time passed, days in the Monteiro house slowly changed. Laughter returned to breakfast. The studio became a gathering place full of color. But in Gabriel's heart, another feeling was quietly growing, a love for Clara. He saw it in the way she gently held Isabela and Sofia when they quarreled, in her persistence that turned a cold house into a warm one, and in the light in her eyes when she encouraged the girls to remember their mother with joy instead of tears. But that love came with fear. Many nights, Gabriel sat in the living room asking himself, "If I love Clara, does it mean I'm betraying Amanda's memory?" Clara felt the same. Her heart trembled whenever Gabriel smiled at her, but soon a voice whispered, "I'm just the one who came after." Do I have any right to step into that sacred place? One late evening, after the girls had gone to bed, Gabriel found Clara in the studio. She was organizing paint boxes, her hands slightly trembling. He stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Clara," he said, voice low, "I'm afraid that if I love you, it means I'm betraying Amanda." Clara looked up, tears welling. "I'm afraid too. I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to replace her." Gabriel took her hand tightly. "No, you're not replacing anyone. The heart doesn't divide when it loves again. It expands. Loving you doesn't mean forgetting Amanda. It means my heart is big enough for both." In that moment, Clara's tears fell, but they were tears of relief. The next day, as Gabriel and Clara silently wrestled with their new feelings, something unexpected happened. Donna Teresa, once stern and rigid, was the first to speak. Seeing the hesitant glances between Gabriel and Clara, she smiled, a rare smile after years of grief. "You think that loving someone new is betraying the past?" she asked, her voice steady but warm. "It isn't. The more you love, the bigger the heart becomes. Helena is still here." She placed a hand on her chest. "And she always will be. But that doesn't stop my son from opening his heart again, and it doesn't stop my granddaughters from needing another pair of arms to protect them." Gabriel stared at his mother, stunned. Clara lowered her head, tears streaming. For the first time, approval came from the one they feared most. A few months later, a small wedding was held in the backyard. No grandeur, only white flowers, simple ribbons, and the laughter of children. Isabela and Sofia scattered petals along the path, their eyes shining with joy. Donna Teresa sat in the front row, rosary in hand, her gaze calmer than ever before. On a small table by the altar stood a framed photo. Amanda smiling brightly, her gentle eyes watching over every moment. When Gabriel and Clara exchanged their vows, a soft breeze drifted through the garden, sending petals fluttering down. And in every heart there was certainty. Amanda wasn't being replaced. She was there, smiling, blessing them. The wedding ended not with luxury, but with a family embrace. Gabriel, Clara, the two girls, and Donna Teresa. A new family, not erasing the past, but continuing it with love. That afternoon, as the golden sun faded, Gabriel whispered into Clara's ear, "We're not betraying Amanda. We're living exactly what she wanted. That love never stops." Clara smiled through her tears. Around them, laughter echoed in the garden, mingling with the memory of Amanda's smile in the framed photo. It was clear to everyone present. Love had not replaced the past. It had expanded it. In that moment, love was truly reborn,